The call from the Executor came on a Tuesday. 15 years since I'd spoken to anyone in my family, and suddenly there I was, standing in the back of my mother's funeral, watching my sister sob dramatically in the front row. No one recognized me with my new name, new face, new life. I'd made sure of that. The last time they'd all seen me was the night of my engagement party, when Rachel, my own sister, destroyed everything I'd built. She had no idea I was there that day, or that Mom had kept tabs on me all these years. No one knew Mom had secretly changed her will 3 days before her death. No one except me and the Executor, who now stood at the podium, about to drop the bombshell that would shake the foundations of my family's comfortable lies. "Before reading the will," he began, adjusting his glasses, "Mrs. Eleanor Bennett has requested I play this recording." My mother's voice filled the chapel, and my sister's face drained of color. "Hello, Rachel," Mom said. "If you're hearing this, it means your sister came back, and now everyone will finally know what you did." Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, our family maintained the perfect façade. My father, Richard Bennett, was a respected cardiac surgeon at Boston Memorial. My mother, Eleanor, a celebrated local artist whose landscape paintings hung in half the upscale homes in Brookline. Rachel was 3 years older, beautiful, magnetic, the golden child with her 4.0 GPA and early acceptance to Harvard. And then there was me, Alexandra, but everyone called me Lexi, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who would sit with Mom during her migraines, who organized Dad's research papers, who drove Rachel home from parties when she'd had too much to drink. I was the steady heartbeat of our family, never causing trouble, never demanding attention. "Lexi's our rock," Mom used to say, squeezing my hand at family gatherings. It wasn't until I was older that I understood this wasn't entirely a compliment. Rocks stay put. Rocks don't surprise you. Rocks are useful because they're predictable. My childhood memories are tinted with Rachel's shadow. At my 8th birthday party, she performed an impromptu ballet routine that had all the parents cooing. My homemade volcano science project that took weeks to perfect sat forgotten as Rachel twirled in the backyard. Dad filmed every second of her dance. My project wasn't even photographed. When I graduated high school as salutatorian, my parents threw a modest dinner. When Rachel graduated college, they rented out the Commonwealth Club and invited 200 people. "It's different," Mom explained when I questioned the disparity. "Rachel needs this kind of celebration. You understand, don't you, sweetie? You've always been so practical." I did understand. I understood that in our family, the unspoken rule was that Rachel's light should never be dimmed. Despite everything, I loved my sister fiercely. We shared secret codes and inside jokes. She'd let me borrow her clothes and give me advice about boys. But there was always that undercurrent, her casual reminders of the hierarchy. "You're wearing that to the winter formal? Here, borrow my blue dress instead. Trust me, you need the help." The summer I turned 21, everything changed. I was home from Northwestern for break when I met James Whitman at a charity event for the hospital. He was the new neurosurgeon, brilliant and kind, with laugh lines around his eyes and a habit of quoting obscure poetry. 10 years my senior, he saw something in me that no one else had bothered to look for. "You have depth," he told me on our 3rd date as we walked along the Charles River at sunset. "Everyone else is skimming the surface, but you're diving deep." For the first time, I felt truly seen. Our relationship blossomed over long conversations about books, philosophy, his patience, my studies in architectural design. After 8 months, on a snowy December evening at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, my favorite place in Boston, James proposed. I called Rachel first. She was in New York by then, working at a prestigious law firm. "Oh my God, he proposed? My little sister engaged? Wait, did you say yes?" Her voice crackled through the phone. "Of course I said yes. Rachel, I'm so happy." "Well, this is unexpected. I mean, he's so established, and you're still figuring things out." A pause. Mom and Dad know? We're driving to their place now to tell them. Don't do anything until I get there. I'll fly in this weekend. We need to celebrate properly. Mom and Dad were cautiously pleased. They liked James. Dad especially respected his surgical skills, but they seemed bewildered that he had chosen me. He could have anyone, I overheard Mom telling her friend on the phone. I guess he sees something special in her. Rachel arrived like a hurricane, full of opinions about ring styles. Mine was quaint, venue options, and wedding dates. Spring is so basic, Lexi. Fall would be much more sophisticated for you two. Then came the bombshell. My parents offered us their vacation home on Cape Cod, a stunning historical property on 3 acres overlooking the ocean as a wedding gift. The Bennett family summer home had been in our family for 4 generations. I'd always loved it more than Rachel, spending hours exploring its secret corridors and reading in the window seats. It was my sanctuary, the one place I felt truly at peace. It should go to Lexi and James, Dad announced over dinner. They'll need a proper home. And Rachel, your career will keep you in the city. Rachel's smile froze on her face. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw something dark flash in her eyes, something that made my stomach twist with unease. How perfect, she said finally, refilling her wine glass to the brim. How absolutely perfect for little Lexi. Little did I know that Rachel had already set her plan in motion. The perfect, reliable rock of the family was about to discover just how quickly everything could crumble. 3 months later, we were celebrating our engagement at the Chatham Bars Inn on Cape Cod. Mom had insisted on hosting it there. It's where the Kennedys would go, she reminded everyone repeatedly. The ballroom overlooked the Atlantic, and April storms lashed against the windows, creating a dramatic backdrop to the champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood in the bathroom, adjusting my cream silk dress, a designer piece Rachel had helped me select. You need something that minimizes your hips, she'd said at the boutique. The dress was beautiful but slightly too tight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that had been her intention all along. There's my beautiful fiancé, James said when I returned, kissing my temple. His hand found the small of my back, steady and reassuring. Your sister's been looking for you. Something about a surprise. Rachel had indeed been busy. Throughout the evening, she'd been flitting between guests like a hummingbird, whispering and laughing, shooting occasional glances my way. She'd brought her new boyfriend, Marcus Holloway, a hedge fund manager she'd been dating for exactly 6 weeks, and had been introducing him to everyone as practically family. Alexandra Bennett, soon to be Dr. Whitman. My father's voice boomed through the microphone. He stood on the small stage, slightly flushed from scotch. If everyone could gather round, we'd like to make a toast. I noticed Rachel slip away toward the service entrance, Marcus trailing behind her. A knot formed in my stomach, the same instinctive dread I'd felt since childhood whenever Rachel had a surprise planned. Dad rambled about James' credentials and how proud they were, barely mentioning me except as the lucky girl who caught him. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Various relatives and colleagues followed with their own toasts, each more generic than the last. No one seemed to know what to say about me specifically. 15 minutes of speeches, and I remained an accessory to James' brilliance. Then Rachel took the microphone, resplendent in a red gown that matched her perfect lipstick. My baby sister, she began, her voice thick with emotion that only I could recognize as artificial. Lexi and I have shared everything growing up, clothes, secrets, even boyfriends occasionally. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. James squeezed my hand, oblivious to the way my body had tensed. But tonight is about new beginnings and honesty, Rachel continued. And in that spirit, I've prepared a little video tribute to the happy couple. The lights dimmed. A projector screen lowered from the ceiling, something I hadn't planned or known about. The first image appeared. Me as a chubby teenager with braces and acne standing awkwardly at a school dance. Our Lexi has come so far, Rachel narrated, as embarrassing photos from my adolescence flashed across the screen. From ugly duckling to, well, let's say swan adjacent. More laughter, more uncomfortable this time. I felt James shift beside me. But what kind of sister would I be if I didn't make sure my little Lexi was making the right choice, that her fiancé was being completely honest with her? The screen changed to show James at what appeared to be a restaurant, sitting across from a stunning blonde woman. They were leaning close, his hand touching hers on the table. "This was taken last week," Rachel said softly. "At L'Espalier in Boston. James told Lexi he was at a medical conference in Chicago." The room went silent. I turned to look at James, whose face had drained of color. "Lexi, I can explain," he whispered. "That's Melissa. She's a pharmaceutical rep. It was just a business dinner." But Rachel wasn't finished. The next slide showed James and the same woman entering a hotel. "The Liberty Hotel, 11:23 p.m., Rachel narrated. "He didn't leave until 8:45 the next morning." My ears started ringing. The ballroom seemed to tilt and spin around me. "And here's the real kicker," Rachel continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Melissa isn't just any pharmaceutical rep. She's also James' ex-fiancé from Baltimore, the engagement he conveniently never mentioned to any of us." James was saying something to me, but I couldn't hear him over the buzzing in my ears. The room had erupted in shocked murmurs. "Alexandra," my mother hissed, suddenly at my side. "Don't make a scene. We can discuss this privately." Rachel's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, sis, but you deserve to know who you're really marrying." I looked up at the screen, now showing a text message exchange between James and Melissa. "Miss you. Can't wait until Boston believes I'm in Chicago again next month." Marcus appeared with a stack of printed pages, hotel receipts, phone records, more text messages, which he began distributing to nearby guests. "I hired a private investigator," Rachel explained, her eyes locked on mine. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't making a terrible mistake. That's what big sisters are for, right?" In that moment, through my shock and humiliation, something crystallized for me. The timing of it all, the Cape House, the very public exposure, the meticulous planning that must have gone into this ambush. This wasn't protection. This was punishment. My father had grabbed James by the arm and was leading him away from me. My mother was already in damage control mode, telling guests there had been a misunderstanding. Aunt Judith was openly crying, and Rachel stood in the center of it all, her face a perfect mask of concerned sisterly love, except for her eyes, which gleamed with something that looked disturbingly like triumph. What no one in that room knew, not even Rachel, was that I had a secret of my own, one that would change everything. And as I stood there, publicly humiliated and betrayed, not just by my fiancé, but by my own sister, I made a decision that would alter the course of our family forever. The ballroom had become a theater of whispers. Guests huddled in clusters, shooting glances my way, some pitying, others gleefully scandalized. My father was in a heated exchange with James near the exit. My mother gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Alexandra, please," she whispered urgently. "Let's go somewhere private and sort this out. People are watching." I gently removed her hand. "People are always watching, Mom. That's the point, isn't it?" I walked toward the stage where Rachel still stood, basking in the chaos she'd created. She was accepting a glass of champagne from Marcus, her smile radiant in the ambient lighting. "Lexi," she said as I approached, her voice honeyed with false concern. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I know it hurts now, but you'll thank me later. He wasn't good enough for you." I took the microphone from its stand. The feedback squealed briefly, drawing all eyes to me. For once, I didn't shrink from the attention. "I'd like to thank my sister for that illuminating presentation," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Rachel has always had a flair for the dramatic. Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "What you all just witnessed was indeed a betrayal," I continued, "but not the one you think." I turned to face the room. "Many of you have known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up as Rachel's little sister, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who never made waves. Tonight, that changes." My mother was frantically signaling for me to stop. My father had abandoned James and was striding toward the stage. I ignored them both. 3 weeks ago, I found something interesting while helping my mother organize her studio. A hidden drawer in her antique desk contained letters, dozens of them, spanning 25 years. The room went completely still. My mother froze mid-step. Letters between my mother, Eleanor Bennett, and her longtime lover, Dr. Andrew Holloway. Marcus's head snapped up at the name. Rachel's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Yes, Rachel, that Holloway, Marcus's father." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. The affair started before I was born and continued until just a few years ago, which makes this engagement party particularly interesting, doesn't it, Rachel? You bringing Marcus as your date? Were you planning to announce your own engagement soon, perhaps? Rachel lunged for the microphone. "She's lying. She's just trying to distract from—" "I have the letters in a safe place," I cut her off, "including the ones where Mom and Andrew discuss their children, all 3 of them, me, Rachel, and you, Marcus." Marcus stumbled backward, his face ashen. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You're my half-brother, Marcus, and Rachel's. Though I suspect Rachel already knew that when she started dating you 6 weeks ago. Didn't you, sis?" Rachel's perfectly composed face crumpled. "You weren't supposed to find out. No one was ever supposed to know." "Know what?" Marcus demanded. "That we're related? Or that you knew and still—" "That the Cape Cod house isn't even Dad's to give away," I finished. "It belongs to Andrew Holloway. It's in the letters. Mom was going to leave Dad for him 20 years ago. Andrew bought that house for them, but Mom couldn't go through with leaving, so they kept their arrangement discreet." My father lunged toward my mother. "Is this true, Eleanor? The house is his?" My mother's face was a mask of fury and fear. "Alexandra, stop this immediately. You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," I replied, "just like I understand why you've always favored Rachel. She's Dad's biological daughter. I'm not." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Aunt Judith fainted. My father overturned a table of champagne flutes. Marcus was backing away from Rachel in horror. I turned back to my sister, whose perfect makeup was now streaked with tears. "You wanted to punish me for getting the Cape House by humiliating me in front of everyone we know. You didn't even care if you destroyed James in the process. And for the record, I already knew about Melissa. James told me everything last week. The photos you have were from him ending things with her, not rekindling them." James had made his way to the edge of the stage. "Lexi, I tried to tell you." "I know," I said softly. "I believed you then, and I believe you now." Rachel was shaking her head violently. "No, no, no, you're lying." "You have to be lying." I pulled a small envelope from my clutch and held it up. DNA test results. Mom, Andrew, me. I had them done after I found the letters. I'm not Dad's daughter. I stepped down from the stage, handing the envelope to my father, whose hands trembled as he took it. "The Cape House was never yours to give, Dad. And Rachel, it was never yours to resent me for receiving." I walked to James and took his hand. "Let's go." "Lexi!" Rachel screamed after me. "You can't just drop this bomb and leave. You're ruining everything." I turned back one last time. The perfect Bennett family tableau had shattered. My mother collapsed in a chair, my father staring blankly at the DNA results, Rachel standing alone as Marcus backed further away from her. "That's what big sisters are for, right?" I said, echoing her earlier words. As James and I walked out, I heard my mother's voice, high and desperate. "Alexandra, if you walk out that door, don't ever come back." I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. The April storm had intensified, rain lashing against us as we ran to the car. I kicked off my too tight shoes, feeling the wet gravel under my bare feet, cold, sharp, and wonderfully real. "Where to?" James asked as we pulled away from the inn, the windshield wipers fighting against the downpour. I took one last look at the Chatham Bars Inn, where the Bennett family illusion was finally crumbling. "Anywhere but here," I said. "Anywhere they can't find us." And with that, Alexandra Bennett disappeared. The next 15 years unfolded like chapters in someone else's biography. I became Lex Winters, a name I chose for its impersonal crispness, its complete lack of Bennett softness. James and I flew to Seattle that night, where his former medical school roommate let us stay while we figured out our next steps. 3 months later, I was accepting a job at a boutique architectural firm in Portland. 6 months after that, James and I were married in a courthouse ceremony with only 2 witnesses, his roommate and my new boss. We built a life far from the long shadow of the Bennett family name. I specialized in sustainable residential design, eventually starting my own firm. James joined a neurosurgery practice and later became chief of surgery at Providence, Portland. The reading of the will is scheduled for immediately after the service. After hanging up, I sat motionless, the phone still clutched in my hand. James came over and gently took it from me. "Your mom?" he asked. I nodded. "Cancer. The funeral's tomorrow in Boston." "Do you want to go?" Did I? The question hung between us. 15 years of building a life separate from the Bennetts, 15 years of healing, 15 years of becoming someone else entirely. "I think I have to," I finally said. 24 hours later, I stood at the back of St. Ignatius, wearing a simple black dress and dark sunglasses. James had offered to come, but this was something I needed to do alone. The church was filled with Boston's elite. Doctors, artists, old money families, all there to pay respects to Eleanor Bennett, celebrated painter and philanthropist. In the front row sat my father, now in his 70s, stooped and gray. Beside him was Rachel, still beautiful at 50, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver, her posture perfect as ever. A distinguished man I assumed was her husband sat beside her, along with 2 teenage boys who must be her sons, my nephews, whom I'd never met. No one noticed me. No one recognized the woman at the back as the long-lost Bennett daughter. I had changed. My once long brown hair now cut into a short, platinum blonde bob. 15 years of West Coast living evident in my more relaxed posture and lack of East Coast trappings. More than that, I carried myself differently, with the quiet confidence of a woman who had built herself from scratch. The service was everything my mother would have wanted. Dignified, artistic, filled with important people saying important things. Her casket was adorned with her favorite peonies. Large reproductions of her most famous paintings flanked the altar. A string quartet played Debussy. After the final prayer, the crowd began to disperse. Many headed toward the cemetery for the interment, others to their cars. I remained in my seat, waiting for the church to empty before approaching the lawyer I'd spotted in a side pew. "Mr. Thornton?" I said quietly. He looked up, startled. "Ms. Winters, you came." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You look very different from your photographs." 15 years will do that," I replied. "I believe you mentioned something about a will reading?" "Yes, at your mother's home. Just family." The reading of the will is scheduled for immediately after the service. After hanging up, I sat motionless, the phone still clutched in my hand. James came over and gently took it from me. "Your mom?" he asked. I nodded. "Cancer. The funeral's tomorrow in Boston. Do you want to go?" Did I? The question hung between us. 15 years of building a life separate from the Bennetts, 15 years of healing, 15 years of becoming someone else entirely. I think I have to, I finally said. 24 hours later, I stood at the back of St. Ignatius, wearing a simple black dress and dark sunglasses. James had offered to come, but this was something I needed to do alone. The church was filled with Boston's elite, doctors, artists, old money families, all there to pay respects to Eleanor Bennett, celebrated painter and philanthropist. In the front row sat my father, now in his 70s, stooped and gray. Beside him was Rachel, still beautiful at 50, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver, her posture perfect as ever. A distinguished man I assumed was her husband sat beside her, along with 2 teenage boys who must be her sons, my nephews, whom I'd never met. No one noticed me. No one recognized the woman at the back as the long-lost Bennett daughter. I had changed, my once long brown hair now cut into a short platinum blonde bob. 15 years of West Coast living evident in my more relaxed posture and lack of East Coast trappings. More than that, I carried myself differently, with the quiet confidence of a woman who had built herself from scratch. The service was everything my mother would have wanted, dignified, artistic, filled with important people saying important things. Her casket was adorned with her favorite peonies. Large reproductions of her most famous paintings flanked the altar. A string quartet played Debussy. After the final prayer, the crowd began to disperse. Many headed toward the cemetery for the interment, others to their cars. I remained in my seat, waiting for the church to empty before approaching the lawyer I'd spotted in a side pew. "Mr. Thornton?" I said quietly. He looked up, startled. "Miss Winters, you came." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You look very different from your photographs." 15 years will do that, I replied. "I believe you mentioned something about a will reading?" "Yes, at your mother's home, just family." "Are you comfortable with that?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. An hour later, I stood in my mother's art studio, a converted carriage house behind the main Brookline mansion. The space was exactly as I remembered it. North-facing windows, the smell of oil paints and turpentine, canvases everywhere. My father, Rachel and her family, and Mr. Thornton were already present when I arrived. Rachel gasped audibly when she recognized me. "Alexandra?" my father said, his voice wavering. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Dad," I said simply. "Rachel." Rachel's face was unreadable. "You look different." "It's been a long time." Mr. Thornton cleared his throat. "If everyone is here, I'll proceed with Mrs. Bennett's last will and testament." What followed was mostly standard: distribution of financial assets, art collections, and property. My father received the Brookline house and half her investment portfolio. Rachel received her art studio, her personal jewelry, and the other half of the investments. Her sons each received trust funds for college. Then came the surprise. "To my daughter Alexandra," Mr. Thornton read, "I leave the contents of the safe behind my self-portrait in the studio, the key to which is enclosed with this document. I also leave her my personal diaries, all 37 volumes, with my deepest regrets and apologies." Rachel started to protest, but Mr. Thornton held up a hand. "There's more. Mrs. Bennett recorded a video message 6 days before her passing. She requested it be played only in the presence of both her daughters." He set up a laptop on my mother's work table. The screen flickered to life, showing my mother, thin and pale but still elegant, sitting in a hospital bed. "My daughters," she began, her voice raspy, "if you're watching this together, then Alexandra came to my funeral. Thank you for that small mercy, Lexi." I flinched at the nickname. No one had called me Lexi in 15 years. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about the secrets I kept and the damage they caused. Rachel, you should know that your sister didn't disappear entirely. I hired a private investigator 5 years ago who found her in Portland. I've been following her life from a distance ever since." Rachel's head whipped toward me, but I kept my eyes fixed on the screen. "Alexandra, in the safe behind my portrait, you'll find letters. Not from Andrew this time, but from me to you. One written every year on your birthday since you left. Letters I was too proud and too ashamed to send. You'll also find the deed to a piece of property, a house on the Oregon coast that I purchased 10 years ago. It's my attempt at replacing what was lost." My mother paused, coughing weakly. "Rachel, the night of Alexandra's engagement party, you came to me first with what you'd found about James. I encouraged you to expose him publicly. I wanted to protect Alexandra from making what I thought was a terrible mistake. I was wrong. I was controlling and manipulative, and I used your jealousy as a weapon. That was unforgivable." Rachel's face had gone pale. My father looked between us, confused. "Alexandra, the diaries will explain everything. My affair with Andrew, my complicated feelings about having his child, my terrible fear that Richard would discover the truth. None of that excuses how I favored Rachel or how I failed to protect you from her jealousy. I was a coward in life. I'm trying not to be one in death." My mother's thin hand reached toward the camera. "I don't expect forgiveness from either of you. I just want you to know the truth, all of it. Maybe then you can find a way forward, with or without each other." The video ended. The studio was silent except for the sound of Rachel's husband awkwardly shuffling his feet. Mr. Thornton handed me a small brass key. "The safe, Miss Winters." I walked to my mother's self-portrait, a younger version of herself, standing proudly before an easel. Behind it was a wall safe I'd never known existed. The key turned easily, revealing stacks of envelopes tied with blue ribbon, each addressed to Alexandra, and a legal document folded on top. As I reached for them, Rachel spoke. "Did you really know about James and that woman before I showed everyone?" I turned to face my sister, really looking at her for the first time. The perfect Rachel Bennett had aged. Fine lines framed her mouth. Her eyes held a tiredness I recognized from my own mirror some days. "Yes," I said simply. "He told me everything. We worked through it." "You're still together? After 15 years?" "Happily married for 14 of them." Rachel seemed to deflate slightly. "I thought I was saving you." "No, you didn't," I replied, not unkindly. "You thought you were punishing me." "But it doesn't matter anymore." "Doesn't matter? You disappeared for 15 years. You missed everything, Dad's heart surgery, my wedding, the boys' births. And whose fault is that?" my father suddenly interrupted, surprising us both. "Rachel, what your mother said in that video about encouraging you to humiliate your sister publicly, is that true?" Rachel looked away. "We thought we were protecting her. By destroying her engagement party? By exposing private matters in front of everyone we knew?" My father shook his head in disgust. I had no idea. I gathered the letters and the deed into my bag. "It was a long time ago. Are you happy, Alexandra?" my father asked hesitantly. I nodded. "Very. I built a good life, a life that's entirely my own." "The house in Oregon," Rachel said suddenly. "She bought you a house to replace Cape Cod?" "So it seems." Would there ever be room there for visitors, for family?" The question hung in the air between us. 15 years of silence, of separate lives, of unspoken hurt, but also 15 years of growth, of perspective, of becoming people our younger selves wouldn't recognize. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I have these letters to read first, and then, maybe." As I walked out of the studio into the crisp New England autumn, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, not yet, but unburdened in a way I hadn't expected. Back at my hotel, I opened the first letter, dated exactly 1 year after I'd disappeared. "My dearest Alexandra, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but today is your birthday, and I find myself wondering who you've become without us, without me. I hope you're happy. I hope you're free. I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to let me explain. I had 15 more letters to read, 15 years of my mother's thoughts to unpack, and a decision to make about whether the Bennett family had a future together. But for now, sitting in a quiet hotel room with the Boston skyline glittering outside my window, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in 15 years when thinking about my family. Curiosity instead of pain. And that, I decided, was a start. It's been 6 months since my mother's funeral. The house on the Oregon coast is beautiful, a modern cedar and glass structure perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, with floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the sunset like one of my mother's paintings. It took me 3 months to read all her letters, absorbing 15 years of regrets, confessions, and observations about a daughter she watched from afar. James and I spend weekends here now, away from Portland's bustle. Last month, I finally called Rachel. Our conversation was awkward, tentative, the words of strangers who share DNA and damaged history. But it was a beginning. "Your boys are welcome to use the guest rooms this summer," I told her, "if they'd like to see the Oregon coast." There was a long pause before she answered. "Thank you, Lex. They'd like that. I've learned that family isn't what I thought it was. It's not a fixed constellation of stars, unchanging and predictable. It's a living organism that grows, breaks, heals, and transforms. Sometimes the breaking is necessary for the healing to begin." My father calls weekly now. He's flying out next month to see our life here. Rachel sends emails with photos of my nephews, talented boys with Bennett eyes and their mother's confidence, but a kindness she never possessed at their age. Perhaps Rachel has learned something too. I keep my mother's last letter on my desk. Unlike the others, it was written just days before her death, when she knew exactly where to find me. "Alexandra, by now you know everything. The question is, what will you do with the truth? Will you bury it, as I did for so many years? Or will you use it to build something new? I was wrong about so many things, but I was right about one. You were always the strongest of us all. Your mother, Eleanor." I chose to build something new, not a replica of what was lost, but something honest, something real, a family defined not by blood or obligation, but by choice and forgiveness. As for the Cape House that started it all, I learned it was purchased by a young surgeon and his architect wife, a couple with 2 small children who fill its rooms with laughter and new memories. Life has a poetry to it sometimes, a symmetry that only becomes visible when you step back far enough to see the whole picture. If there's one thing I've learned from this long journey, it's that our lives aren't defined by a single moment of humiliation or triumph, but by the choices we make in their aftermath. Sometimes disappearing isn't running away, it's running toward the person you were always meant to become. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to hear more journeys of transformation and redemption. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones where we rewrite our own endings.